Lecture 10A on birds and flowers before Huizong. This will be the first of two lectures on Chinese bird and flower painting through the Song dynasty. This one taking us up to about the time of the Emperor Huizong in the late Northern Song period, and the next one, 10B, will be on Huizong's period and afterwards through Southern Song painting. In one respect, these lectures have been inconsistent. Well, probably lots of respects, but one in particular I'm thinking about, and that is that I announced at the beginning that they were going to be heavily visual and not deal seriously with questions of meaning and function, what the paintings meant to the people of their time, how they functioned in their particular periods. Well, I've followed that generally, but I've also spent a lot of time talking for landscape about the ideas and the philosophy that I think underlies the great development of landscape in China. I believe I have things to say about that are not general knowledge, and I want to get them down, get them out, and use them to, I hope, illuminate the paintings. On the other hand, I won't try anything of that kind for bird and flower painting. There are lots of publications, old Chinese writings, modern studies, which give you at endless length the symbolism and meaning of birds and flowers, what a particular bird signified in its time, how people used the painting of that bird. Well, I'm not trying anything of that kind. You'll have to get that elsewhere. This isn't a matter on which I feel I have anything original to say, so I leave it alone. On the other hand, about the stylistic development of this kind of painting, I can definitely contribute a whole new account, which is what follows now in Lecture 10A. I'm going to dedicate this lecture, which is on bird and flower painting, to Ellen Johnston Lang, a valued colleague, old friend, good friend, co-chair of my 1977 delegation, as seen in the pictures here, our official delegation picture in which she stands along with me and Ann Clapp, and a picture of her and Wai Gom Ho on at the West Lake at Hangzhou. Ellen's wearing the yellow cap. Ellen is a prolific, wide-ranging scholar. She's done fine work on a number of subjects, including early bird and flower painting. We've worked together on things, we've argued, we've etc. Been together at lots of symposia. She and her late husband Dick, who always traveled together, and she did an article on early bird and flower painting, especially in wall painting and archaeological finds. Her work is not the same as mine, but all the better. This lecture is about bird and flower painting, as I say. Up to now, we've talked about figure painting and landscape, and now we get to bird and flower. And I'll do the whole history of it up through the Song dynasty in this one lecture, 10A and 10B. This is based, by the way, on a lecture that I gave back in 1982 in a symposium in Kyoto. And it's on my website as CLP6, 6A and 6B, if you want to read it there. Very much along with what I'll be saying. And I had slides which I had made from paintings in the PRC collections. We had been there recently, and the slides were little known. The paintings were little known, and together they cast a lot of light, I thought, on early bird and flower painting. And so it's going to be another lecture in which I'll be showing lots of details. There's been good work done on bird and flower painting, a lot of it on literary writings. People like, Soper or Seren or quite a few others have written based on Chinese writings about the painters Huang Chuan and Xu Xi especially. And that's all very valuable, and what Ellen has done is valuable and so on. But nobody has done quite what I'm going to try to do now, which is the kind of developmental Gombrich-like style history that I've used for other materials. And that's what we're starting to do now. Okay, here we go. We begin in the Tang Dynasty, and here we go. This is one of the engravings from the tomb of the Princess Yongtai. We've seen it before, early 8th century. Now, Tang flowers were introduced in a lot of Tang paintings, as we've seen, wall paintings and others, to suggest an outdoor setting, to decorate, add decorative materials to the figures, and so on. Pictures of flowering plants, pictures of flying birds, and so on. Let's have the next two, please. Here are two standing women from the Yongtai tomb. And you see birds flying in the air and flowers down below. So these are very, Tang Dynasty people loved decorative effects of all kinds, and this is certainly one of them. Well, of course, these are engravings in stone, but in fact the same linear style is seen, next please, in wall paintings of the time, line and color, which is a lot of Tang painting, as we've seen, is essentially line and color. These are original slides from a section of the painting on the ramp leading down into the tomb of Princess Ida. The line drawing is rather heavy here because wall painting should be seen from a distance, but essentially it's the same. Line and color, and a rock down below, and so on. Next, please. Here a detail from a Tang wall painting from one of these tombs. This is actually a copy, not from the original. And a flowering tree with leaves and palace ladies, and up above a bird. This is a hoopoe bird. I know that because my great teacher, Ed Schaefer, once was on a radio program, a TV program actually, and was looking at this picture and suddenly sees this bird, a hoopoe bird, and he knew all the birds, was able to identify it. At any rate, done in outline, done so as to distinguish the species, and decoratively, and with the wings spread in flight. Here's another detail from another of these wall paintings, again, just a copy. A groom of some kind, or eunuch maybe, holding a falcon on his wrist. No, it's a hunter, and a tree, and two birds, very small birds, up in the upper part of the tree, one of them in flight, as if that's supposed to be distant, but it's a little inconsistent with the placing of the tree in the foreground. But at any rate, again, line and color. And the same is seen in the paintings we have of the hunting scenes. And I showed a number of those from the tomb of Prince Ida. No, it was Zhang Huai in my lecture on Tang tomb painting, figure painting. And here is one of them with a falcon on his wrist. Again, drawn, as I say, in heavy line because it has to be seen from a distance. Paintings to be seen up closer and finer line. But basically line and some color. Okay, onward. We see now, let's see, what have we? And here, just to confirm this, is a fragment from Central Asia, Astana in Turkestan, Tang painting, a lady with a flying bird, and what richly decorative jacket on her, as you see, quite wonderful, and her face, seen full face, and so on. And in the upper part, again, a flying bird, outline and color, no doubt drawn so as to identify the species. I don't know what it is anyway. So it's pretty consistent anyway. Now, of the materials we have, among surviving paintings on silk that include bird and flower themes, especially valuable and illuminating is the hand scroll in the Liaoning Provincial Museum, representing ladies with flowered headdresses. We looked at this at length in one of my earlier lectures. And with an old attribution to Zhoufang, which we needn't pay much attention to. It's essentially an anonymous picture of a late 8th or 9th century, maybe. Okay, at any rate, there are numbers of places in this where we have flower and bird motifs. This is the first part of the scroll, and in that we see this fan which the little girl servant is holding, painting with a peony on it. The flower is central to the composition. I mean, it occupies the whole space pretty much. Drawn in pale line, white washes of color, symmetrically disposed, filling the space. This very much shows us what Tang flower painting must have been like in the Tang Dynasty. Especially interesting now the second part of the scroll. Next, please. At the end here, the flowers, I'll show you a detail of them in a minute. The flowering bush has flowers that are drawn in, with the petals outlined in shaded color. The woman at the end holds an insect that she has caught. That's one of these themes of the painting. Richly decorative altogether, but anyway, here is a detail, yes, of the plant at the end. With flowers drawn with shaded petals and green leaves. Here, even closer. Yes, here you can see quite closely what it is. Okay, well, putting this all together, we have a pretty clear idea of what Tang Dynasty flower and bird painting was like. But for a bird, the next, please, the crane is especially important. And here's a detail of that. You see the outline, it's outlined in color all right, but instead of simply flat color, the artist puts the white on each of the feathers unevenly shaded, so that each feather seems to turn at an angle to the picture plane, and this gives it some added sense of three-dimensionality. We could find similar effects if we wanted to look at figure painting and religious painting at Dunhuang and things like that, but I'm not doing that. At any rate, this is a very good, gives us a very good idea of what bird painting was like in the Tang Dynasty. Now, the picture of the crane with its wings outstretched is very close to the sixth and last crane in a series six cranes that's supposed to preserve a composition by the artist Huang Quan, painted in 944 for the ruler of the state of Shu, where he was working. And it's supposed to survive in a copy by the Emperor Huizong. Well, I know this only from an old reproduction book, so I'm not vouching for the authenticity of it. That's another matter. But it seems fairly clear that the crane does resemble the one in the Liao tomb painting, and this is interesting because it might connect it with say, the Tang Dynasty. Huang Quan worked in a style that owes a lot to Tang painting. I'll talk about that later. The crane in this one was called Wind Dancer, and it was described as balancing against the wind with wings spread as if dancing, and so on. Okay, this connection between Tang court painting and the artist Huang Quan, we'll come to in a minute, I deal with in my lecture. You can read about that. He studied with somebody who had studied with, etc., a Tang artist. But I'm not doing that in these lectures very much. Okay, we go on. Huang Quan, a major artist. Oh, this is another painting, by the way, similarly, supposed to be Huizong copy after Huang Quan. It's in the Osaka Municipal Museum, the former Abe collection, and it's represents two cranes in bamboo with what's supposed to be a Huizong inscription. Again, we can't talk about the actual age of it. It may be a Ming painting, but it probably preserves some look of how these cranes were painted by Tang artists and by Huang Quan. Okay, but among the many paintings attributed to Huang Quan, famous artist, so a lot of things are attributed to him, the most interesting, I think, is a short hand scroll in the Palace Museum in Beijing, which bears a brief inscription down in the lower right corner, which is supposed to be from the hand of Huang Quan himself, stating that the painting was done for his first son, Huang Zhubao. In other words, it's a study piece with a lot of pictures of birds and insects and turtles and other things. Well, that's it, and done for his son to study. Now that's interesting. There's some question of the authenticity of this inscription and of the painting, but I think it must be close to Huang Quan. It makes good sense, and I will use it as if it were a genuine Huang Quan painting. I'm just about ready to accept it as that. Not many people do. But whatever the authorship of it is, it's a repertory of models for students of painting, similar to another recently published at that time that is, work. This is in the Palace Museum in Beijing also, and I think I brought it in back when we talked about 10th century painting, or Tang painting even. It's a painting that's horses, and it's supposed to be a study work for artists who want to paint horses. In other words, it's all the ways to paint a horse. Horses running, and horses being bathed, and horses with grooms tethered to their posts, and all the rest of it. And it's interesting and valuable for that. Here's another section of it showing the horses up close. Horses of different color, obviously horses observed and sketched, and it's a valuable study piece, and it represents what you might call in 10th century painting a kind of taxonomic urge to show lots of different kinds of things, all the different kinds of horses, or the way the Jiao Gong scroll, which we saw, shows all the different ways that the fishermen have of raising their nets, and the different ways they live, and so on. So it's important for that reason. Okay, anyway, now we get back to the scroll attributed to Huang Tran, and here's a detail showing two insects. Well, everything in this is drawn meticulously, as if illustrating an entomological treatise of how this beetle looks, and how that grasshopper looks, and so on. Now, these elements of the pictures you see still belong to the outline and color method, pretty much. Here, next, please. Just a minute. Here we go. Yeah, now, here. Yes, this is quite wonderful. This is well, it's a wasp. I was showing it to my associate Rand Chatterjee, and I said bee, and he immediately corrected me and said wasp. So it's drawn carefully enough that someone who knows, as I don't, I'm dumb on these things, can see immediately what it is. Anyway, quite a wonderful little thing. This is enormously blown up, you understand. It's very small in the original. Now, to look at the birds in this picture, this scroll, I have a number of really good detailed slides in which we can really see them. And as we'll see, they exhibit a new feature, which is not seen in the earlier examples of birds that I showed. In addition to outline and color, we have fine strokes of ink, rendering very sensitively and accurately the texture of their plumage. Here, in what I would take to be a robin, whatever it is, the breast of it on the underside you can see very well. Next, please, let's go on. Or here, pigeons. And I have a detail of that here, close up. Here we go. The detail beside the hole. Here you can see very well what the artist has done. He's drawn outlines, but they're very fine outlines, and they don't set it off strongly from the surrounding space. And then within those outlines, he has drawn the plumage of the bird in fine strokes of ink, or sometimes of color, but mostly ink. Now, that's a very important new development. Now, it's not coincidental, I think, that just about the same time, landscapists are developing ways to give texture to their earth forms and rocks. And it's something that develops into what's called Cunfa, or texture stroke method. My old 1962 article called Some Rocks in Early Chinese Paintings, which you'll find in my bibliography if you want to read it, showed how the options that were open to 10th, 11th century landscapists were covering the form with texture, which tended to flatten it, or using shading, which which gave it volume. But anyway, okay, you can read that if you want to. I'm not going to do that all here. But at any rate, this is a parallel development in bird and flower painting. Fine outline plus texturing. Now here are two sparrows, and again, I have a detail of one of them. I'll put down that with it. Yeah, this is close up, and you can see here exactly the same technique of drawing fine outlines and then painting a fine hatching in soft strokes that replace or enhance the color washes while they are still being confined within the outlines. Now this would seem to represent the next step beyond the Tang manner of portraying the birds, and on present evidence we can associate this tentatively with Huang Quan. He was credited with a more lifelike style than before. The term xie sheng, painting from life or drawing from life, is used to characterize his painting, eventually pejoratively because it's set against another term, xie yi, painting the idea, which is supposed to be better, but that comes later. Okay, using that for Huang Quan, we can fill out this picture of Huang Quan's style of painting with a work that is quite convincingly ascribed and very probably by Huang Quan's third son, who was named Huang Juzai. And this is a painting called Partridge with Sparrows in a Thorn Bush, and it's in the Palace Museum in Taipei. The attribution is made in a title up at the top by the Emperor Huizong, and in fact it's recorded in Huizong's collection. This, by the way, is mounted, interestingly, like the painting attributed to the noble scholar painting of the 10th century. It's mounted in a hand scroll for better preservation. It's a narrow, rather long, narrow painting, and you can see, well, if you saw it, it would be in a hand scroll case. That's about beside the point. At any rate, it appears to be the real thing, a reliable work of this artist, and as we look at it in detail, the next, please. The composition, first of all, is rather like one that we'll see in a bit, reliably 10th century from a tomb. That is to say, there's a kind of near middle ground, in this case rock and bank and bamboo and bushes, and birds perched on the bushes, sparrows in this case, and then in this case, a larger bird, the partridge, in the foreground. We have wall paintings from Tang and 10th century that follow this composition too, so it was common. Okay, going on. Here's now getting a bit closer. One of the birds up above are sparrows again, and we see them in flight and perched and turned different ways. And then we see the two birds in flight smaller down below at the right and left, a little unnaturally really. And all this set around a group of bamboo and leafy plants and bare plants. And then down below, let's see the sparrows. Well, as we come closer to them, we see they belong to this manner of outline and some texture, just a little bit, and very lively in their posture and so forth. The one of them with its beak open as if chirping, and another one at the left sort of turned, aimed downward. Variations in their postures on the branch, their way of hanging on. And then the, let's say, rather unnatural birds in flight at the sides. The bird down below, next please. The partridge is done, as we see, in basically an outline and color with some texturing on the feathers. Notice, by the way, that the rock behind is done with shading, but without texture strokes, without repeated strokes. This is very much like a painting we saw attributed to Guangdong, supposed to be of the 10th century. And supposing that it is around that age, it makes good sense. The bamboo and so on are painted in fairly heavy outline. The next, please. Yeah, here we go, one last slide of that. Now you can see it up close. As with the crane in the Huang Quan painting, the color is put on in a somewhat shaded way on the feathers. Some of it has come off, but it's in pretty good condition. And it's done, the whole thing is done so that the bird, the identity of the bird, the kind of bird it is very easily brought out. Okay, the next, please. Now, this is the painting of rabbits and sparrows with bamboo and flowering plants. It's one of the two paintings found in a Liao tomb located near Shenyang in northeast China. datable roughly to the third quarter of the 10th century. We saw the other one, a landscape with Taoist retreat and so on. We looked at that at great length in an earlier lecture. So this must be roughly contemporary with Huang Zhucai's work, and is rather similar in some ways, in that you have a sort of a near middle ground group occupied with plants and sparrows perched in it, as we'll see. And then in the foreground, instead of a big bird, you have two rabbits. But anyway, and that's the whole composition, so to speak. And as I say, there are other paintings, tomb paintings and so on, that bear out this kind of composition. Here we go. Yeah, this is closer, but you can see more clearly what it is. It's a little bit crude. It's not by a great artist, let's say, but it's definitely of the time, and it's very valuable for that. The parts don't hold together as well as we might like. The whole foreground is marked with weeds set at intervals, rather unnaturally, and then the two rabbits, and then a kind of middle ground row of lilies painted in heavy color, and then the bamboo and sparrows up above. Now we go up to the upper part, and we see the bamboo painted in outline, and three sparrows. Now, like the ones in the painting by Huang Zhucai, these are shown in different postures, perched on the bamboo, sort of three ways of seeing a sparrow on bamboo, really. And when you get in close to them, and here's the detail, you see that they're done with outline drawing and then some heavy color over this, and some texture. For instance, on the head of the bird here, you see it. So this is all very consistent with what we've been looking at. We have what seems to be a fairly clear stylistic development. Now we'll come back later and look at the lower part of this picture, but meanwhile I go on to another scroll, which is a hench, to continue looking at sparrows for a while. This is a hand scroll in the Palace Museum in Beijing with a signature, maybe not a genuine signature. You can see it in the middle bottom here of Cui Bo. Cui Bo, the Bo character written rather archaically, a somewhat suspect signature anyway. Cui Bo is a great master of the Northern Sung Court Academy, active around 1050 to 1080. And there's one really major work by him dated 1061, which we'll see in the latter part of this lecture, and I'll spend a lot of time with that. That's a great painting and very important. This, on the other hand, is an uncertain attribution, essentially anonymous, you might say, but we might ask him all the same why it was ascribed to Cui Bo instead of somebody else. It may have something to do with him. He was something of a virtuoso painter, if we believe the Sung writers. He painted in a freer, looser manner than his predecessors, and he was somehow able to endow the birds and animals of his pictures with more animation, with more life than before. Okay, now here we see another painting in which the sparrows are shown in a variety of postures and angles in which they're seen. The bird preening its wing in the upper part there, a bird seen head-on way up in the upper right, a bird with his head up chirping, and so on. So this is another presentation of types, or a kind of repertory of ways to depict sparrows, something like the scroll of horses we saw earlier. But the liveliness and diversity is like the early works, but it's achieved in a different way, as we'll see if we look in close at the birds. But before we do that, here's the right half of the scroll, with a bird in flight in the upper part, a bit artificially. I say artificially because it's like, do horses ever run with all their legs stretched out? I don't know whether sparrows ever have all their wings spread out like this. But anyway, there it is. And another bird hanging upside down. Okay, now here let's look at a detail. Now here, the branch is done, as you see, in looser brushwork than anything we've seen so far without outlines. And this method of depiction also belongs to the later period, and it agrees with what we'll see in Cui Bo's great painting of 1061. That's outside our concern for now. We're looking at the sparrows. And the sparrows reveal a lot that's familiar from early portrayal, that is the use of white pigment and brown and the markings of the bird and so on, and the way its beak is open and chirping. But in addition to this, we see that something quite new style, and that is that the bird is no longer, the parts of the bird are no longer outlined. They're no longer enclosed in clear, firm boundaries. Instead, the washes and the brushstrokes make up the substance of the bird, defining its three-dimensional form and describing its surface pattern all at once, and very, very effectively. This new mode of depiction, which we can at least credit to the time of Cui Bo, and he may have been instrumental in it, brings about a great increase in the sense of liveliness and lifelikeness of the bird. It's a major move forward in our Gombrickian kind of argument. Okay, that is the way if you look at birds, you don't see them set off in the surrounding space, but you see them as softened by movement, by atmosphere, by the immediacy of perception. This is another major development. Now, here's another one perched on the branch, seen the same way, and some part of the third bird on the far right here. And you can see the same thing. Very fine texturing, but not enclosed by outlines. Okay, that's a major move forward. Well, forward in our, as I say, Gombrickian sense. Now, if we were to go way up to the end of Sung, we could see this really lovely and entertaining little picture, quite well known in Japan, an album leaf representing young sparrows in a basket, attributed to a 13th century master named Song Rujur. And we see the eventual outcome of that mode of painting. Here the birds are now made up only of fine brushstrokes, held together only with limited washes of brown and white color. The animation of them, the immediacy of them is enhanced. The sense of substance is diminished. It's an anecdotal picture, as you see. The young birds, the baby birds, are so excited about the coming of their mother with something for them to eat. She's somewhere up in the upper left, that they're about to overturn the basket. And notice, by the way, just by incidentally, how extraordinary it is that the artist is able to paint this basket without making it simply a dull, repetitive pattern. Now imagine doing that somehow. I won't try to explain how it's done, but it obviously is done. Anyway, the little birds are chirping, and the little birds in the basket are very excited, and they're all given this sense of life and movement by this extraordinary way of representation that the artist by this time is able to command. Okay, I think we can take this series, as we've seen it so far, too, as indicative of the main line of development in bird painting from the Tang through the Song. Now I want to go back to consider some other stylistic options that are open to the artists of this period. Now we go back to the painting from the Liao tomb, and now we see the lower part. The rabbits, two rabbits browsing among the weeds, one of them chewing on a leaf, the other looking up, and flowering plants, lilies of some kind. I always have trouble with my L's. Lilies of some kind in the middle ground. And then we've seen already what's up above, the sparrows and bamboo. The lilies painted in heavy green color. The bunnies, they are done again in outline, very fine outline, but very definitely bounded. And then within this texture, and some shaded color. Touches of white on the ears and the eye, around the eye and the leg, and also on the underside of the rabbit. Okay, or here even closer. Here it is. Very, very lively, interesting rabbit. This, as I say, is not a great painting by any means, but good. Okay, then we look at the lilies. Now this is interesting because they are done in heavy color over outlines, and the black outlines can still be seen some places where the color has flaked away or is somehow thinner. Now, this may give us the best available clues to the nature of what is called mogu, or the boneless manner of painting. Literary accounts credit this achievement to Huang Quan, or else sometimes to Xu Xi's son or grandson, Xu Chongsi, who is supposed to have followed Huang Quan's style, but that's another subject. Now, this boneless manner, at any rate, is associated with with sometimes Huang Quan, but at any rate, it's not to the point to try to associate it with a particular manner. But it's more important to understand the character of it from extant paintings. Now, it's ordinarily been translated and understood as boneless without bones, meaning without outlines, color without outlines. But I suggested in my lecture, and I developed this at some length, and I think it's right, that it might instead mean something like sunken bones. The mo character, moku, with ordinarily rendered as without bones, can also mean sunken. It means sort of being immersed in water above the top of your head. And if you say sunken bones, then it can mean the outline, the drawing, is sunken under the heavy pigment. And when the pigment flakes away, you see it. I think that's probably the real meaning. I made that argument. It had been, I was anticipated in by Suzuki K, and I credited him with really first coming forth with this theory. But here we have some pictorial evidence for it. Here, coming up closer again. Now you can see how the lilies are drawn in dark outline and then color, sometimes shaded color, white and pink, painted over them. Or here, even closer up. Yeah, this gives the picture very well. So that's an argument about a new reading or a new understanding of a familiar term, which interests those of you who are serious about Chinese painting and its vocabulary and so on. Okay. Now, let's see. The next. Oh, this is just to confirm this. This is another of these fragments from Central Asia found in Buddhist sites. Astana, I think it is. Turfan, anyway, region. And it's a fragment of a bodhisattva, the hand of a bodhisattva holding a flower. And if you look carefully at the flower, you can see this too is done with heavy pigment painted over outlining, and which is under it. Okay, enough for that. Now then, I've avoided up to now, actually, and one well might avoid, addressing the problem of Xu Xi. Xu Xi, great early Sung master, maybe the most difficult problem in early Chinese bird and flower painting. What is Xu Xi? Bamboo, old tree, and rock in the Shanghai Museum, which is attributed to him. This painting has no Xu Xi signature. It does have a very fine inscription written upside down, actually, on a portion of the old tree. Wai Gam Ho was the invention of this, but it doesn't give anything about the artist. It just says something kind of self-praise, saying this bamboo is worth more than 500 pieces of gold or something like that, as I remember. Okay, anyway, a truly remarkable painting, a painting that is distinguished by a penetrating realism. I showed it at the very beginning of these lectures, and I've used it over and over to make this point. A painting in which the brushwork is so closely subservient to description, to portraying the thing, that it scarcely seems to be brushwork in the Chinese meaning of bifa at all. There aren't any distinct brushstrokes, not brushstrokes that have any independent calligraphic character. The highly unusual manner of depicting the thing, which is pretty much unparalleled in other extant Chinese paintings, which is why I use it all the time, depends on a combination of reserve techniques with the leaves, the bamboo, the stalks, and so on, and the tree trunk set off by the surrounding washes of ink, and in other places the reverse, with elements of the picture painted in dark ink against the lighter silk. Now, when we come to, here is a detail that shows the right section with the bamboo stalks. And if you follow the rightmost bamboo stalk up from the bottom, you see it begins as light against dark, and then up at the top it turns into dark leaves against lighter background, and so on. Throughout the painting, the artist pulls off this extraordinary feat in a way that's hard to, it can't be matched elsewhere, and it's very hard to see how he did it. Well, it can be said that he might have used some kind of reserve technique. That point has been made. That is to say, painting the leaves and the bamboo stalks and so on in something wax or who knows what, and then putting ink wash over it. But even that doesn't really explain it very well. Here is a detail of the upper part of the leaves. It is really extraordinarily realistic, and as I say, no trace of the artist's hand, and something that is obviously reveals a great deal of observation and a technique that we can't really fathom just how it was done. This mass of leaves overlapping. You understand this is ink on silk. It's not like oil painting. And the twigs and the whole effect, the whole purpose or meaning of the painting, of course, is the vicissitudes of the effect of weather and season and harsh conditions on living things, and of course the rock, which survives them better, but the bamboo broken and the leaves, some of them stripped away and so on, and the leaves in the upper left tattered. Powerful, I think, wonderful painting, although it hasn't received a lot of attention. Well, I brought this in again when I talked about literati painting, so I've talked enough about that for now. There is an inscription on it saying, "This bamboo was worth more than 500 pieces of gold." Probably just an expression of pride written in by the artist, written upside down. I'll talk about a painting by the Knick-Knack Peddler by Huizong, in which the artist similarly adds a tiny little inscription bragging about what he's accomplished in the picture. Putting together the scattered evidence, one might conclude tentatively that the absence of brushwork of any distinct character was an integral part of 10th century realistic style, and that Xu Shi exemplifies this tendency in bird and flower painting, as Li Cheng did in landscape. Things are said about Li Cheng that similarly suggest he may have worked in ways that didn't have usual kinds of brushwork. How Xu Shi's painting might have looked in color, we have no way of knowing. I did use a painting that's not ascribed to him, but is in the Palace Museum in Beijing, and which has, this is an unattributed fan painting of peonies in the Shanghai Museum, rather. Seals of Liang Qingbiao, a great collector, but at any rate, which seems to preserve more than usual of this shaded, three-dimensional rendering of leaves and blossoms, especially this blossom down here. And the leaves. Maybe Xu Shi's painting in color was something like this, combining that as color with shading. Okay, that's the most we can say. The problem of Xu Shi remains very much unresolved, and we can only hope that some paintings might turn up somewhere that can be really reliably associated with him, which will match literary accounts of his work and give us some better clue to how he really painted. But meanwhile, as I say, it's a great mystery of bird and flower painting. Now, I want to, not at great length, but I want to introduce this hand scroll painting, which is in the Palace Museum in Beijing. And this is a painting attributed actually not to Xu Shi, but to an artist named Zhao Chang, of the early Sung period. It's only an attribution, it doesn't mean very much, but I put it here because the Palace Museum's great connoisseur and scholar Xu Bangda believed that this painting was somehow connected with Xu Shi, and he wanted to use it to represent Xu Shi's style. I don't quite see what he meant by that, and I don't entirely agree, but let's look at it for a while anyway. It seems to me a Sung painting, maybe a later Sung painting, by some specialists, maybe in butterflies and insects. That's what the painting is really about. Well, here at the beginning, you see the Qianlong Emperor's inscription in the upper left, all the stuff that clutters up paintings that have been in the imperial collection. Okay, and then the next section that goes on, butterflies fluttering above plants, and the plants drawn in fairly heavy line. And then when we come to the end of the painting, here, a large grasshopper and another butterfly, and leafy plants and flowers and so on. Well, it's a fine painting, and it may be, as I say, sort of later in Sung. There's a whole school of painters at a place called Piling near Nanjing, so-called Piling School. Shimada wrote an article about them. I've written about them here and there. In my Yuan Dynasty book, I reproduce a painting in the Ming book, used to be attributed to Chen Xuan in the Detroit Museum, very fine, of plants and insects and butterflies and so on, as certainly representing the school. And there are numbers of paintings in Japan by Piling school artists. Well, it may be an artist of that kind, a local school or some specialist in insects and plants. The grasshopper drawn quite skillfully, the leaves turning in space and so on, mainly outline and color, quite traditional style. Here, blossoms and a leaf turning, and so on. Here's the red leaves. Some of the painting done in plain color strokes and washes without outline, some of it done in heavy outline. Here's the grasshopper up close and the green leaves around it. It's a quite fine painting, but as I say, I don't want to associate it with Xu Shi or anybody else, and the grasshopper up very close. There were specialists who did paintings of particular subjects, such as insects, and this might be one of those. Okay, enough of that. Now, going on. More importantly, probably for our purpose, when we come into the 11th century, the whole question of amateurism comes in. I dealt with that at great length in my previous, lecture number 8, the rise of Wenrenhua literati painting. Well, this amateur ideal had its effect also on the taste and the critical values in bird and flower painting, as well as in other genres. And this somewhat alters the issues and alters the kind of painting that's done. Well, we note that from both literary evidence and a small amount of pictorial evidence, that a crucial development in painting of the 11th century of this kind was a new popularity of the theme of wild geese and reeds in riverbank settings. A very quiet, poetic theme that was done apparently at its height by an artist named Huizong. Huizong we don't have any works by. He was early Northern Sung artist, and early 11th century. He was praised as, quote, expert in creating cold sand spits and misty inlets, lonely, empty, and vast. This was people such as Su Dongpo and Huang Tingjian wrote poems for his paintings. Now, we don't have any Huizong. I used this painting, which is simply an anonymous picture in the Palace Museum in Beijing, a hanging scroll. I used it in my book on poetic painting, The Lyric Journey, to represent somehow this ideal of the quiet bank and the birds and so on. It's an anonymous picture, and it probably isn't as poetically subtle as Huizong would have been, but anyway, here it is. Trees at the left with birds in it here in the detail. Here another detail of the sand spits stretching off into the distance, and birds, water birds located along them, some of them in flight, along with plants. And here, yes. Well, okay, that has to serve, I'm afraid, to represent Huizong. We don't have anything better. This ideal, by the way, of poetic painting, it's Alfreda Merck, who has written particularly well about this. And if you want to understand it all, you can read her writings. Okay. Now, although, as I say, we don't have any paintings of the kind by or close to Huizong himself, we do have another fairly recently discovered work, a hand scroll in the Palace Museum collection in Beijing, which is a signed and apparently genuine work by an artist named Liang Shimin. Liang Shimin was active as an official during the reign of the Emperor Huizong at the very end of Northern Sung. And in addition to being a painter, he was an amateur painter, but he was mainly a poet and, as I say, an official scholar official. Well, so this is in a way relates to the whole question of amateur painting, but within the academy, which is different from the kind of painting done by Su Nongpo and the others outside the academy. I insist on making this kind of distinction, although some people don't want to make it, that they paint different pictures depending on their situation in Chinese society and so on. Okay, I don't have to make that point because I'm making it throughout these lectures. The title of the painting here, we see the first section of it. The title of the painting, written in the upper right here, is by the Emperor Huizong himself. And he apparently admired this picture, wrote a title for it. The title means Fine Snow on Reedy Sandbanks, at the beginning of the scroll. And below it, there's a double seal, Shanhe imperial seal. So it was approved by the emperor himself. It opens, as you see, with a painting of bamboo, bare tree, the bamboo which survives through the winter, a bare tree, and rock. Well, this immediately, of course, reminds us that the same kind of subject was being painted at pretty much the same time by Su Nongpo and other amateur artists. It was a specialty of Su Nongpo. And in fact, the writers of the Huizong catalog, the Shanhe Huapu, recognize this quality of Liang's painting and praising it. Here the next slide also, the close-up of the bamboo, old tree, and rock. They recognize that he is doing it in a careful, rather restrained way, in contrast to what was going on in the scholar amateur school outside. And they offer this as a good direction for scholar amateurs to take, in opposition to which they must have perceived as excessive sort of undiscipline and laxness in other amateur artists outside. Because they write about Liang Shimin's painting, they say, this is in the Shanhe Huapu, quote, his painting is refined and delicate, not careless, disciplined, not loose. For the most part, he respects established standards and rules. Therefore, defects in his work are few. Generally, he departs from what is predetermined, but not from what he is. Don't worry about all that stuff. And he talks about how people can be liberated from constraints, but not that liberated. So it's sort of like somewhat enlightened Republicans who sort of open up a little bit, but not all that much. Anyway, what they were against, of course, here let's put it on the screen just to remind you. What they were arguing against is this kind of painting done by Su Nongpo. This is a painting attributed to him, maybe by him. At any rate, very much amateurish, very crude and coarse, and so forth, from the standpoint of these academy masters and the Emperor Huizong. Okay, anyway. Now the scroll goes on. I'll show it. Here's the next section of the scroll. There's not much there, and that is the very essential virtue of this scroll for those who admire it. That it's so quiet and not much goes on in it, and you can enjoy it quietly. And a long sand spit and a few ducks. The next, please. Here, the pair of ducks, the male and female mandarin ducks, and then the emperor. Is it? No, that must be Chelo again. A little tiny duck on the end of the spit here, and then going on. Then we go off into the distance, and you see geese on the sand spit and flying off into the distance. We've seen that numbers of times by different people, all the way back to Tong painting and Chosuan. Anyway, And then another pair of ducks here, another kind, on another sand spit in the next section. And a lot of reeds and a lot of wash and a lot of quiet sand spits and a lot of poetry, presumably, if you go for this kind of thing. And here's the end of it, his own inscription. The title is written again by the artist. Here's a detail of the inscription at the end. The title is written again by the artist, and he adds, "Painted by your subject Yang Shermin." So he painted it for the emperor, and he was playing to this emperor's taste for the for poetry and painting, for things that are not too harsh and obvious and so on. So okay, this all belongs to this kind of development in painting, which we see also in landscape at the time, and here also in bird and flower painting. That is the transformation that included the elevation of Guang Wei as a forefather, preference for ink monochrome or subdued, limited use of color, and so on. Arranging a few materials sparsely in a spacious setting, and so on. Features associated with the school of Zhao Lingrong, for instance, it belongs some out of that. Okay, that's as far as we're going to go in this lecture 10A. We'll continue in the next one by looking at the bird and flower painting, first of the great Cui Bo, the painting I promised, and then a painting, the paintings of Huizong and the Huizong Academy.